Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Touchline. This is the 2025-2026 Premier League predictions, or rather, this is my 2025-2026 Premier League predictions. I have done predictions before in the past. They've just not been consistent, evidently. Um, and even then, I'm not very good at predicting. You guys know that whenever I cover Beyond the Touchline episodes, right, you guys know how often I get the results correct, spot on, bang on, or even just getting the result right in general. The outcome has been just very difficult. So coming into this one, it's going to be the same idea. I don't know what's coming up ahead of the new season. I can only have some level of recency biasness with what has happened over the past season, and also maybe some transfers that has happened for some of the clubs, and some intuition really of what I think is going to happen. Injuries can be very common for a club, for example. Will Tottenham suffer the same fate again, etc.? So we're just going to see what we can do to look into all these and just have a general predictions. Obviously, I think the ball knowledge is probably going to be absolutely whack. I'm sure I'm going to get flamed by anyone who watches this video, probably saying that I just don't possess any ball knowledge. At the end of the day's predictions, because you also have to consider other things that could potentially happen. But I'll try my best, and I'll just try my best to also defend some of my decisions. But yeah, drop a like on the video. Guys are going to enjoy this one, and of course, subscribe if you're new around here. But yeah, let's jump right in. Right, so starting off with the relegation spots, in 20th, I've actually put Brentford. Now, the rationale behind this, right, I think it's probably going to surprise a lot of people, but I don't think it really surprises me. Should Brentford get relegated this season, or at the bare minimum, they're bound to struggle. First of all, they lost Thomas Frank, right, to Tottenham. They've lost what a really good manager he is, and just to lose that service, I think is going to be detrimental to the team. They've lost Ben Mee, which I think was a really decent centre back. Yes, he's aging and stuff for sure, but I think it was really decent centre back. They lost Nergard to Arsenal, they lost Wemo to Man United, and they lost Flecken to Leverkusen. So ultimately, in my opinion, they've pretty much lost 4 of the starting 11 plus their manager. That's insane to me. For you to rebuild that sort of team, which has been known to be decently consistent in the top half of the Prem, and now you've lost 4 of your starting 11 and you've lost your manager, how are you going to rebuild that team to make them even slightly competitive in the league in the season to come? Right, they brought in Coyote from Fiorentina. I have some notes on the site, which is just covering some of the transfers that all the teams have done. They've brought in Kelleher from Liverpool, which is obviously a Flecken replacement. They brought in a really young Cam of Lambo and also Jordan Henderson. Yes, I think Henderson's going to bring that experience in, right? He's won the league with Liverpool, but I think if you watch Henderson's journey, I think he's gone to some Saudi club, Al Ettifaq, and after that he's gone to Ajax as well. It hasn't been a very smooth sailing career, I guess, for Henderson after post Liverpool, I'd say. He's probably going to bring the experience, but ultimately, the 4 players I mentioned earlier, very, very briefly, are they going to be enough to help Brentford to even be competitive in the Prem? I'm not exactly too sure. You've lost pretty much nearly half, in my opinion, of your starting 11. And I think the 4 players that mentioned, especially Nergard and Wemo and Flecken, they are just so influential in the team. And Flecken had saved Brentford so many times in goal, fantastic. And Wemmer's got multiple goals last season. Nurkic had multiple assists as well. Um, that to me is a problem, isn't it? Like you've lost too many good players, point where I'm not confident in the team being able to fight properly and thrive in that sort of environment. So on that note, I think they've had the worst hit of everyone, which I think is really going to crumble the shape of the Brentford team as well. So I've put them 20th. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to agree with me, and you will probably see once I fill up the relegation spots why people won't. So now moving on to 19th position, I personally have put Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, I would have predicted Wolves to be relegated multiple times in recent years, right? But they've proven me wrong time and time again. Like last season, they've had this 5 to 6 game winning streak, and that's allowed them to stay in the Prem. 2 years back, I think something magical has happened despite the club being a disaster when O'Neill was still in charge, and arguably, like, it was shocked that he got sacked as well. But then, with what has happened with Wolves in the past couple of years, it's crazy how they're still in the Premier League, considering that, to me, it's just something that's not right with Wolves. And I think the season, they are probably going to suffer that same fate. But will it happen? I really, really don't know. Now, in terms of transfers in, it has been extremely minimal. They've bought in Fer Lopez from Celta Vigo, which is a decent attacking midfielder, very, very young. They've made Larsen's loan from Celta Vigo permanent as well, which is good. And they brought in Arias from Fluminense, decent, I think he was in the Club World Cup. But the issue is the outs again. You know, they've lost so many players. You know, they lost Sarabia now. They've lost Dawson. They've lost Cunha. They've lost Aït-Nouri. They've lost Semedo, and they've lost Gonçalo Guedes. They've lost so many players again in the starting 11. And what I've mentioned, the transfers in or marquee players that are coming into the team are clearly just not going to be enough for Wolves to even stand a chance to even fight properly with all the teams that are above them or even around them. I think it's going to be really difficult. And on that note, it just doesn't seem right to me. Again, when you lose so many players, you must understand it takes a while to really get the team going again. It takes a while to adapt to that sort of new idea. Whereas I feel that having new additions in would just give you more options to play around with the team. But now there are fewer options, which means they're probably going to have to stick with what they have. And I think that's just tough, isn't it? To expect so much of the players that they have for them to just get the result week in, week out. How are they going to emulate what they did last season again? I think it's going to be really difficult. I'm not saying they will not survive. I just think the chances of them surviving are just getting slimmer and slimmer unless somehow after this video, they suddenly go on a transfer spree, or in January they go on a transfer spree. But as of now, I think with what is at stake at the club, I just don't see it happening. Now, coming into 18th position, I'm sure this team is going to shock multiple people, and people will be like, why have I put this team there? I've put West Ham to finish in 18th, and I'm predicting my second favourite club of the Premier League after Man City to get relegated. The caveat is as such, honestly. If Potter leaves halfway through the season, he gets sacked halfway through the season, we bring in a decent manager who can really turn the team around, I just do not see why we won't get relegated this season. To be honest with you, we might just survive, genuinely. I think the highest that we're probably going to finish is like 16th this season, to be honest. But 18th to me just feels like something that's probably going to happen. Now, we're buying Kyle Walker-Peters from Southampton. Okay, decent right back, I guess. We've made Tadebo's loan permanent, and we've bought in Callum Wilson. But we've lost Cresswell, Fabianski, Soufal, Ings, Soler, Ferguson has gone back to Brighton after being on loan with us. Zuma has left the club. Kudus has gone to Tottenham, and Antonio has been released. The bulk of the team that has been so influential in the West Ham ecosystem for so many years, past Noble's departure, have all pretty much gone now, which to me is tough again. The three teams I put in relegation spots ultimately are teams who I feel like have had the biggest loss thus far out of all the teams in the Premier League. And I think it's crazy for me to not even put a single promoted side here. Usually people would think that promoted sides are going to get relegated again because the gap between the Championship and the Premier League is a little bit too high. And don't get me wrong, I fully attest to that for sure. I just like to think that this season is probably going to be different. I'm looking at the deficit that some of the teams have had compared to possibly the additions that the other promoted sides have. I think the promoted sides arguably, potentially, stand a higher chance. This line is definitely going to age if all the three promoted sides are getting relegated again this season. But at the back of my head, I'm just thinking these three teams have been so established in the Premier League, yet, especially Brentford, to be honest, for me to put Brentford 20th is bizarre enough, right? And you've got Wolves now in 19th, which a lot of people have predicted them to get relegated over the years. And then for me to put West Ham, I think West Ham over the years, again, when Moyes was in charge, you know, they had a Europe spell, they won the Conference League, which was great, fantastic. But since his departure, we've got Teggy not really doing much at the helm. Would we have given him more time? Should we have given him more time? Is nothing altogether. And ultimately, I think Potter, as I mentioned in Beyond the Touchline, if you guys have listened and watched, you know I kept saying that he's a wild card, and I think this wild card just needs to leave this season if we don't want to get relegated. I just don't think, I really don't see, I don't have the confidence in him and the team right now to even pull out the relegation zone, and that's nuts for me to sort of say that and put him in that position. If anything, this is the prediction that I want to be wrong. I do want to see West Ham again in the Premier League, of course. I just know at the back of my head it's going to be a huge struggle, in my opinion. But, you know, put him 18th. I've got nothing more to say about that. It's going to be pretty hard, I guess, for this club. We'll see what happens for that one. Right, in 17th position, I've decided to put Leeds. Now, it's arguable that you can probably swap West Ham and Leeds around. It could be your final day drama where West Ham pick Leeds and Leeds get relegated again for sure. But in my opinion, the Leeds team just hasn't really changed much. I mean, from the original side at least. They're bringing a lot of new additions, of course. I mean, but ultimately the main departures have been Gilavogi, Firpo, and Solomon. Solomon obviously end of loan with Leeds and was rather decent for them actually last season. His goal contributions probably didn't show, but I think his attacking talent showed itself definitely. They brought in a couple of players. They brought in a Mecha, a forward. They brought in Bono, Bijol, two centre backs. They brought in Goodmanson, a full back. They brought Sean Longstaff, midfielder, Stature midfielder, and Perry in goal. Decent additions. They've arguably strengthened from start to finish, essentially, from the defensive line to the attacking line of the team, which I think is crucial, right? Some of these players, some of them are relatively young, but they're not the youngest, I guess, 26, 27, some experience under their belt. It is going to be a relatively young team fighting to survive in the Premier League. And I think because of the experience that they probably possess on their own, I think they can bring that into the league games, right, for sure. Daniel Farke, is he going to inspire this team to a crazy finish like what Bielsa did many years back when Leeds just got promoted again? I don't think so. I'll be frank, I don't think so. I think that is going to be a tall order from the manager again. But putting them 17th is, I'd say, a very weird position to put Leeds in. I think they could finish higher, but again, they could get relegated. We know some teams have spent multiple amounts to bring in new recruitments, but ultimately they do get relegated. I think Fulham was probably one of them a couple of years back, when honestly the signs that they brought in were really, really decent, but they just somehow didn't click. Sometimes it's too many cooks spoil the broth kind of idea, and we'll talk about one team that is probably on that line, but I have faith in them to do well. But with Leeds, I think it's going to take a while before they actually settle into the Premier League, because I think, there's going to be some factors for sure. But I think to put them 17th is going to make it seem as if they're really going to struggle, but probably not as bad. It's going to be difficult. I mean, you've got to understand, for them to finish ahead of Brentford, Wolves, and West Ham, first time asking when the pattern has been the promoted side's going to get relegated again, it is going to be a little bit challenging. But I think to put them in 17th is like, probably going to survive, but I'm not exactly too sure. So that's why I put them there. Nothing more to say about Leeds anymore. Now in 16th, I've decided to put Bournemouth. Now, of course, last season, Bournemouth did reasonably well, and I think they were one of the shocks of the season, right? Obviously, inclusive of Nottingham Forest, inclusive of Brighton, inclusive of Brentford. Bournemouth were one of the teams that was stellar, right? But they've lost Huijsen to Real Madrid. They've lost Kepa, who's gone back to Chelsea, and I think has actually gone to Arsenal. They've lost Kirkes to Liverpool. They've lost two marquee, or like two of the best players, in the back line. They've lost Travis, which I think is a decent goalkeeper for them. They've lost Neto as well. They've decided to bring in Truffert from Rennes, which is obviously a Huijsen replacement, and they brought in Petrovic. I don't think that's going to be enough, to be honest, right? They've got some decent players at the team. Evan Nielsen, they've got Semenyo, of course. Lewis Cook is probably still there. Yes. But to me, that's not going to be enough. Like, what they've done last season was so special. I just don't know if they're able to replicate that again this season. And in the back of my head, I'm just thinking it could just be a one-season wonder. So many teams last season could have had a one-season wonder. We could honestly see Nottingham Forest tumbling down again this season. We could see Bournemouth, for example, tumbling down again. We could see Brentford tumbling down again. We could see so many of these teams tumbling down to the point I'm just like, I need to be slightly conservative in the way I'm approaching this. And of course, I think at the expense of how the other teams are doing and see how I'm going to, try to balance that out. But I think for Bournemouth, they are probably going to struggle a little bit, for sure. I think the back line is genuinely slightly vulnerable. But of course, with Bournemouth attack, they've been really, really good. Don't get me wrong. So I think this is when the attacking front is probably going to really help them to pull through. I don't think they're going to get relegated, to be honest. I think that chances of that is arguably slim. But for them to always have results going their way, like what happened last season, I think that's a little bit challenging. So putting them in 16th, I think, is a reasonable enough position to put them in. Again, I could be wrong, but I just think at this juncture, it probably just makes the most sense to me to put them there. They could finish higher, but I doubt it. Maybe the highest probably going to finish is 14th. But of course, if they do bring in crazy signings, they can really boost the position. Or if they do another last season, then by all means go ahead. But as of now, I think that's where I'm going to put Bournemouth. So now in 15th, I've decided to put Sunderland. Now, Sunderland is going to be a very interesting one for sure. They've lost Joe Bellingham to Dortmund and, of course, Tommy Watson to Brighton. But they've brought in a lot of players, right? Which I think is so bright. These players have a lot of potential. They brought in Enzo Lefebvre, they brought in Diarra, Siddiqui. He was only 20 years old, centre back, but he's so consistent at Union SG. But Reinildo, Atletico Madrid, 31-year-old left back, experience. Talby from Club Brugge, 20-year-old winger. Brighton, Adinkra from Brighton. Granit Xhaka, experience with Leverkusen. Another goalkeeper, Royce, and of course Martin Guiu from Chelsea. They've brought in some really it's in my opinion they're well picked players which are probably suited to what Regis is gonna play, Regis Labrie, I think is his name. The way he's gonna play the team. And I think with that in mind, with the players he's bringing, especially if they're catered to his liking, I can see genuinely something special from Sunderland. And it would be amazing for them to, survive in the Premier and continue to stay. We've lost. I think I've missed Sunderland in the Premier League. I don't know about you, but I've missed Sunderland. When they got relegated, I was like, it's a shame. And I was like, they're probably going to come back the first time asking. Turns out they went in the opposite direction. They got relegated to League One, and then they had to climb their way back up here again. I hope the Black Cats are going to stay for sure. A little bit of a soft spot, I guess, considering how established Sunderland Football Club are. And I think with the players that they brought in, as I said, it's a mixture of experience and young talent. And they've not really lost a lot of their players in general, like the squad from last season. I think they're probably going to do decently well. I think at the start, they're either going to do very well or they're going to do average. And I think as the season goes on, it's probably going to get a swap. But it's either the results at the start or results at the end are probably going to say them a lot. And that's why they're probably going to finish where they are going to finish, in my opinion, which is 15th. Right, 14th. This is a weird one, to be honest. I've decided for Fulham. They've bought nobody. They've only bought Lecomte from Montpellier, a 34-year-old goalkeeper, and they've lost Vinicius and Willian. So in some sense, Fulham are probably just having the exact same lineup they've had last season coming into the season. Nothing has changed. Do I see them arguably being better than the 6 teams below them? Yes, and that's why I put them there, essentially. That's pretty much it, really, for Fulham. There's nothing much to say, because, again, it's a weird one. They've had a decent last season. And I think Marco Silva's probably going to try to do something again to really get them up there somehow. But, in my opinion, I think this one is going to be a bit... I'm not exactly too sure what's going to happen for them. You've not made signings, you've not lost anybody, you've kind of keep status quo as it is. If Marco Silva is comfortable with that position and the nature of that, sure. But again, when I see them emulating the performance from last season, I think it's going to be really, really difficult. I think it's tall order. It's possible, but I think it's tall order. So, in my opinion, I would say no. And I decided to put them at 14th because, honestly, I just don't see them finishing higher than that, considering all the other circumstance of the other teams. So now 13th, who have I put? Burnley. So I'm predicting Burnley to finish as high as 13th. And it's the highest position amongst all the promoted sides as well, 13th, 15th, and 17th, respectively. Now, Burnley have lost a couple of key players, in my opinion. They've lost Redmond, which I think is decent enough. Jonjo Shelby, which is honestly a very good player back then. Sarmiento, end of loan, gone back to Brighton. And James Trafford to Man City. Right, they've lost a really important goalkeeper. And last year, Trafford's statistics at the Championship were remarkable. The backline of Burnley was what made them such a successful club last year in the Championship. They've conceded, I think, less than 20 goals in 46 games, which is just incredible from their perspective. Kept so many clean sheets. The results are boring, don't get me wrong. They're like winning games like 1-0, 2-0, that's it. It doesn't matter. They've got a result over the line. But I think also because of the lack of goal scoring ability, that's why they're probably behind on Leeds goal difference, etc. But this season, they've also brought in a lot of players. Humphreys from Chelsea, Anthony from Bournemouth, which is a loan that's made it permanent. Marcus Edwards from Sporting, Fleming from loan to permanent. Weiss, a goalkeeper, which is probably a Trafford replacement in my opinion. Zebe, Kyle Walker, Jacob Brun-Larsen from Stuttgart, Ugo Chukwu from Chelsea, a decent centre mid at a very young age. Dubravka, another goalkeeper. And also Broja. So probably Dubravka is probably going to start ahead of Weiss. Although, to be honest, I think if we're going to look at age, then Weiss feels like a direct replacement for Trafford. There is a lot of potential with this team, right? There is a little bit of skepticism of me putting him in 13th because I know Scott Parker. He is not very good when it comes to managing in the Prem. He's not had the best track record in the Prem. But his track record in the Championship to promote sides in the Championship is insane. Is he going to break that duck? I am not too sure either. But in my opinion, I think with what I can see in Burnley, it's possible. I have faith in them. I like to think it's a bright team. Genuinely speaking, it's a very, very, very bright team, and I have reasons to believe that they're going to be okay coming to the season, and I have reasons to believe they're going to be better than all the relevant teams. For them to finish ahead of Fulham is crazy, to put it there, and I'm sure I'm going to get flamed. This prediction right here could go so many ways. It could just be back down to the relegation zone by the end of the season, or they could stay thereabouts, or they could even be better. I don't know. But as of now, I have reasons to believe that Burnley, they're going to be fine. And they just need to try. I think probably going to struggle a little bit at the start, but after that, it probably should get better. So fingers crossed on that one. So now moving on to 12th, I've decided to put Everton. Now, again, I have some level of faith in Moyes to really get this team to a decent position. Not going to be stellar, but I think it's going to be good enough for them to stay in the Premier League slightly more comfortably than they've done in recent years. They brought in some decent players, in my opinion. Alcaraz, Sloan has been made permanent. They brought in Tiano Barry, which I think is crucial. They do need a good forward, and he's only 22 years of age from Villarreal, but his stats are rather decent. I've checked it out online, and I think he's good. Hopefully, he can bring such form into the Premier League. I think he's going to be a really, really good striker. Everton have not had the attacking line that they needed. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, to my opinion, just needs out, or he's going to be the most backup striker that Everton are going to have. Beto is like, okay, sure, but to me it's just clunky. He feels like a Salomon Rondon, to be honest, but without the head, more like on the feet kind of Salomon Rondon, maybe Peter Crouch kind of vibes, which I think is not really the style of play that I want to see from Everton. I think they're so much more capable of that. They need a lot more versatility in the team, agility as well. Yeah, and they brought Mark Travers, which is a decent backup to Pickford. I don't know when Pickford's going to leave, but he's probably going to save them again this season a lot of times. And Dewsbury Hall from Chelsea, which is one of the latest ones. But of course, ultimately, they've lost quite a lot of players. They've lost Young, Begovic, Virginia, Decore, Holgate, and Mulpay. They've also lost Broja, end of loan, back to Chelsea, of course. And they've also lost Mangala, which I think is a decent centre mid, back to Lyon. I mean, situation at Lyon's nothing altogether. And Lindstrom as well, end of loan, back to Napoli. So in some sense, I think Everton are like back to status quo in terms of the team and where they stood. So I don't know, but I think Moyes has the ability to really get the team together. I think this is more about manager's instincts and more about how is he gonna bring this team forward with him. And I think it has to be through this way. I just don't think, based on squad alone, they're going to really finish in this position. I think it's going to be a lot more than that to really get them to where they are, more than just the signings. It really has to be within the team itself, because we know Everton struggled so much in recent years, right? Which is very surprising considering during the Lukaku time was just a couple of years back, and they were fighting for Europe constantly. I hope this is the start of the season where it's going to be, again, an upward battle for sure, from being just very comfortable in where they are fighting relegation to just, I think finish decently in the top half soon rather than later. Now, 11th. Again, just like Fulham, I don't really understand why Palace is there. Not much has changed. They've lost Schlupp, they've lost Ward, lost Holding, but they've brought in Sosa, a 27-year-old left back, and also Benitez, a decent goalkeeper. But Palace have known to finish in 11th to 14th for so many years now, to the point of just like, let's just put them back there. And what has happened last season was pretty decent as well. They've had a really rough start, and I think the Wolf fears that they're probably going to get relegated, but after that, they've just picked themselves up. So should they carry such form and get into the season with the stability, which I think they would want, because had they had a much better start than they've had. Correction, had they had a much better start last season, I think they would have finished higher than where they finished last season. So this season coming in, I think it's probably going to be the same. Like, they're going to struggle at the start probably, and then they're going to really just ramp it up towards the end, and that's how they're probably going to finish 11th. But yeah, they're probably going to finish around there, to be honest. 11, 12, 13, 14th is just where Palace are going to finish. I would be surprised if they do get relegated this season. I just don't think so. And I'll be also equally surprised should they finish anything higher than 10th. So that's Palace for you and for me and for all of the Premier League fans. Of course, I forgot to mention they have the Europa League coming up. Again, the situation on that, I'm not exactly too sure if they're still having Europa League. See, they won the FA Cup last season ahead of Man City. But are the fixtures going to hurt them? Probably. But at the same time, yeah, I just feel that 11th is just Palace's territory, like that zone. It's just theirs. Right, now moving on to the top 10. Now, first of all, I've decided to put Nottingham Forest. Now, they are in the Conference League, which I feel that is going to impact them if Nuno decides to really prioritise European football for them, which I think is a good idea, to be honest. I think that's what West Ham did a couple of years back when they win the Conference League and then the Europa League, and ultimately that has really hindered their league position. You know, the inability to really change between plays, squad depth was fundamental really to fight in Europe as well. And I just think Nottingham Forest are probably going to be a slight victim of that. Probably at the start, I think they're going to go both like league as well as that. And I think it's probably going to impact them at the very start of the season. And I think to finish 10th is not too bad, considering how I think last season was really a shock for us. You know, they were in the Champions League positions for, I'd say, a good solid half of the whole season, really. They were really competitive. And I think they are going to be competitive this year as well. I just don't think they're going to finish in Europe again. They could make me go wrong. But yeah, I think 10th is a decent position for them to finish. They brought in some decent players, of course. Igor Jesus and Cunha from Botafogo, both of them. And Angus Gunn, I think, is a decent goalkeeper for a backup. But of course, they lost Elanga. But I think it's good they've not lost Morgan Gibbs-White. I think he was probably destined to go Tottenham at first. And that deal didn't happen. So, good. I think they've kept a really, really good player with them. Of course, I think it's always good to retain as many players as you can, whilst bringing fresh blood to really, you know, make the team go alive again. So yeah, 10th is okay for me for Nottingham. They might finish higher than that, but will they finish lower than that? I think it's also possible. Now in 9th, I have decided to put Tottenham. Now I think there are reasons why people will probably put Tottenham higher than where I've put them, and it completely makes sense, right? But at the back of my head, I'm just like, they've had so many injuries last season. I'm not sure if that problem is going to be solved again this season. But the thing is, they've also finished 17th last season, and they've also won the Europa League last season. So, with that being said, they are in the Champions League this season, which means it's going to be a lot more fixture congestion for them. And if, in the event that a lot of injuries start to mount up again this season for Tottenham, I just don't see them really competing for Europe massively. They're bound to give up something. And I think with Thomas Frank coming in as well, obviously Postecoglou sacked. Thomas Frank coming in, it's gonna be a challenge for him as well. I think it's his first time managing in the Champions League too. There's gonna be so much for him to handle, and I think it's gonna take a while to really adjust to that. Players that have left, of course, I think Heung-min Son is the biggest one, leaving to LAFC, or Son Heung-min, leaving to LA after being so many years at the club. Legend, if you ask me. Højbjerg as well, going to Marseille. But they've also brought in some decent players like Kudus from West Ham, which is decent. Palhinha on loan from Bayern, some experience there. And Tell as well, making the loans permanent. So the bulk of the team generally hasn't changed much. And to be honest, Tottenham have decent squad depth, albeit their squad depth also got injured last season, which is why ended up Postecoglou had to tap on the youngsters. It could happen again, same issue. It might not even be just them. It could be any team in the Premier League this year. And that's one of the reasons why they will finish where they finish at the end of the season, because of injuries. Injuries are a huge factor, honestly, for a lot of these teams, especially if you're fighting in the relegation spots. You don't want to be injured. You don't want your best player to be injured. And once that happens, you are probably going to be screwed in any shape or form. So with Tottenham's problems, with fixture congestion, with possibly an impending, which sounds like a negative word, but a possible injury crisis again, I think it's reasonable enough to put them finish 9th. They would finish higher, in my opinion, if they're out of Europe early and we go full focus on the Prem and it works. So a lot of factors have to come in. Criteria is huge for them to finish higher than 9th, in my opinion, because I just think there are 8 better teams than them, at least. And considering where they finished last season, it's going to be a challenge. So I put them there. And arguably, I've not put them lower than that, which is remarkable considering where they finished last season. And also, I've not put Man United finishing anywhere you've seen so far. So, for me to put these two teams as high up this season again, despite where they finished last season, it's possible ball knowledge out the window. But again, I don't think it's recency bias. It's just more of like where I genuinely feel where the team stands, and that's where I've decided to put them. So yes, Tottenham in 9th. So yeah, in 8th, I've decided to put Brighton exactly where they finished last season. No European football, etc. It's just a decent team. And they genuinely could have finished higher had they not had that slump mid-season, like what Man City had. But they've lost a lot of players. They've lost João Pedro to Chelsea. I think that's a huge one. They've lost Barco, who's pretty decent. Adingra to Sunderland, Ferguson on loan to Roma, and Estupinian to AC Milan. They've bought in a lot of young players, which is a typical Brian business. They bought in Maxim de Cooper, which is a 24-year-old fullback from Club Brugge, and they bought in Buscagli, another left back, 27-year-old. So I think those are like Estupinian replacements ish. But of course, I think they've not brought in another striker to really replace João Pedro. He was really good for Brighton. I can see why Chelsea signed him. 60 million price tag. Okay, never mind. But anyways, yeah, I just think Brighton again. They're probably gonna emulate what they did last year, like a spell of really goodness, bunch of goodness, and then probably a stint where they are just probably gonna struggle a little bit more than they should be before again coming out strong towards the tail end of the season. I think it's something very very similar. I think it's gonna be again agonizingly close to finishing in the European spots. But I think at this juncture, considering where they are, etc., I think it's a really decent spot to finish, and I think the manager's done really well as well. Very very young, isn't he? And to bring Brighton to 8th last year was really good, and I think if they're still able to keep that position into this year, I think it will still be a successful season in my opinion, unless again they really make the wrongs, some of the wrongs from last season right, and they keep a lot of the right that they've had last season. So as of now, I think Brighton are doing nothing much wrong, just accept that really dark spell that they've had halfway through the season last year. If they're able to turn those multiple draws to wins, or some of those losses into wins, they really would see themselves finishing in Europe next year. But for now, 8th is for me. In 7th now, into the European spots. Now, for 7th, I decided to put Manchester United. So they're probably going to get Conference League, in my opinion. Out-wise, I think it's not too much, apart from the Eriksen one, the Rashford going on loan to Barcelona. Lindelof has been released, as well as Johnny Evans, who is actually retired from football. Now, they've brought in two exceptional players of Cunha and Mbeumo. Very interesting to see both of them in the same team, because they clearly both play for different teams. But honestly, now seeing them in the same team, it really just elevates the entire quality or the attacking talent that they have, Manchester United. So again, Amorim is just all over the place. Again, somehow they finished 16th, 15th, 16th last year, and they were in the Europa League final, only losing Tottenham Hotspur. But of course, in the league, they've been all over the place. They've been absolutely remarkably funny. They've not brought in a new goalkeeper, which obviously I'm amazed at that. Amorim sticking to Onana, sure thing, man. You do you. But I think ultimately it's these two players, Cunha and Mbeumo, the experience and the attacking talent they can bring into the team. I think that's probably going to make a difference. But I think this year we should see a Man United that we're so used to seeing in recent years, in the sense where they do struggle, but not as bad as last year. But they're always finishing like 7th, 8th position. So I'm sensing something similar to that. I just don't think you can finish below top 10. This line could age, and we could see a repeat of last season. But as of now, I just think, where Man United are, with no European football to cater to next season, this season rather, just full focus on the league, full focus on cup competitions, and just focus on that to really get them to the position where they want to be at, which I think 7th is not too bad. It might go otherwise, but I would believe a lot of people will predict them to finish higher for sure. And I think just putting 7th just in case something really goes wrong for them, or I think it's just a very conservative place to put them thus far, because yeah, I just don't see them finishing very high, but I don't see them finishing very low either, despite what has happened last season. So we'll see what happens with Man United, but 7th place will be for them. Now moving on to 6th, I've decided to put Aston Villa. Now, Villa-wise, again, the general squad has been the same. I know they've lost Rashford and Asensio because they were on loan and now they've gone back to the parent clubs. DSRC has also gone back to Chelsea. And Coutinho, I mean, he's not been really playing much, so that's fine. They brought in some young players again, but the biggest one for me is probably Gisan from Nice, another striker. So again, some attacking talent. Emery is very, very comfortable with his club. I have to put my hand up and say that he's done an exceptional job with Villa. They've not won trophies, of course, but they've been reasonably consistent in recent years in the Premier League. They have made themselves really look like a force. When he first came in, they were nowhere, right? When Steven Gerrard was sacked, they looked like they would struggle a lot. But now they've been so consistent to the point that there are reasons to believe that we should just put them where we think they will finish, which is in a really good position. Top half, the bare minimum for sure, is probably target at Villa for the season as well. Would they finish higher than sixth? In my opinion, it is possible if things again at the top go crazy. But I think with the top five teams I've put there, there is reason to believe that they probably won't finish anything higher than sixth. So I think sixth is a really good position. It's like the best of the rest essentially after the top five. They, in my opinion, can probably start to sneak into the top six, top six, the big six rather, if they continue to stay like that. And I think teams like United and Tottenham are probably going to lose their name in that big name as well. So yeah, I think Villa again. I expect a huge credit again from Emery coming into the season to really bring the team to potentially where they could finish. I know last season again they were inconsistent at times, and I think that also ultimately prevented them finishing a high position, and they should be. But again, they've been in the Champions League before. Are they in the Champions League again this season? Hold on. Ah, they're not. Yes, they're not. Okay, so yeah, I remember now because they've fumbled the last game against Man United. Martinez getting a red card, and because of that, now they find themselves in the Europa League. So some European competitions to look forward to. They could potentially progress really well in the Europa League for all I know, and they could finish highly as well. So that is possible. But yeah, so Villa in sixth, I think, is a good position for me, at least in my opinion, and that's why I've decided to put them. So I'm looking forward to see what Villa can do, for sure. Now, moving on to the top five, in fifth, I decided to put Newcastle. Now, they will miss out on Champions League football because I just think the top four teams are just that superior, in my opinion. And for Newcastle wise, they've not made a lot of changes, of course. They've lost Longstaff and Dubravka, but brought in Elanga, which is a really bright player from Nottingham Forest. So I think it's a loss for Nottingham. I think the talent of Elanga is also probably the reason why I decided to put Nottingham in 10th. But I think ultimately it's because of their European commitments and as well as the fact that I just don't think they probably have the squad left to handle to that change as well. But of course, in Newcastle, again, the bulk of the team is still there. Nothing much has really changed in itself. It's still really good. But if Isak leaves, which seems to be the case, and if they don't get a good enough replacement for Alexander Isak, they probably will not finish fifth. And I can see them finishing lower than that because to replace Isak is really going to be a hell lot of it. Hell of movement, scouting, really just getting the right one again. So really full on replace Isak because he's been so good for Newcastle. It's crazy. So yeah, in my opinion, that's my take on that for Newcastle. Nothing really much to say. Again, they've been also very consistent. They are one of the teams, despite having so much money in that takeover, they've been really good spenders, with their money. So I see them again doing really well this season, providing they don't lose Alexander. Or if they do lose Alexander Isak, then they need to figure themselves up. Especially if it does go to Liverpool. The top four is probably going to change again from my predictions. But yes, Newcastle in fifth for me. Again, also looking forward to see what Newcastle Villa Brighton can do coming into the season. So again, these spots could genuinely be interchangeable. We've seen last season when all these spots from fourth to eighth, there was a point where they were separated by like 3-4 points. So something similar could happen again this season. But I think at the end of the day, Newcastle are probably going to finish pretty steady. So fifth for me, despite having their European commitments that's coming up. But I still have faith in them as well as Villa. Now into the top four at last, and in fourth, I've decided to put Chelsea. Now, believe it or not, I've predicted the fourth, fifth, and sixth to finish exactly where they finished last season. Now, Chelsea, they've brought in some marquee signs for sure, right? Liam Delap, João Pedro, obviously strengthening up there, and Sarr. And they've sold, I would say, a decent amount of deadwood. Bettinelli has gone to Man City, of course. Kepa has gone to Arsenal. They've had so many goalkeepers. They also sold Petrovic. Now they've sold like half the goalkeeping goalkeepers. Madueke, that's a big loss, of course, to Arsenal. João Felix onto Al Nassr. Dewsbury Hall to Everton. Ugo Chukwu to Burnley, and Broja as well to Burnley. Despite losing these many players, I still have reason to believe that they're going to finish pretty highly. They've just won the Club World Cup. They smashed Paris Saint-Germain. They may have had an easy path into the final, but the performance in the final was really stellar, and I think it's just a sign of things to come of what genuinely Chelsea can do. Paris have been absolutely dominating everyone, especially in last season's Champions League, and to get smashed like that against Chelsea speaks volumes to me of what Chelsea can genuinely do coming into the season. And it's not only that, they have a way of somehow creeping onto people. When Maresca came in, I mentioned, I think in the podcast as well, and I was saying that in the videos, I was thinking it can go both ways, but I just have faith in Maresca to do something pretty decent at Chelsea. And if he's able to get that spot on, it's definitely going to be a problem. I think that's going to be the case again this year. And don't get me wrong, I think last season, actually, near at the halfway point of the season, they were 2 points behind Liverpool. And of course, they decided to slip away. But at that juncture, I remember calling them, are they title contenders? And at that point, I said no, because I don't think they're prepared. And I was right to say that. And I think this year, it's probably going to be a build on upon that. But it's still not going to be easy for sure. If anyone thinks that Chelsea is going to be a walk in the park, going to be absolutely flourishing this season, I think probably not. And they've also got European commitments, albeit they had it then. But of course, I think this one is also not going to be a lot easier, isn't it? You're coming to the Champions League. It's not just the Conference League anymore. So it's going to be, again, new territory from Maresca coming ahead. He's really going to have to see what he can do to really, you know, dig this team and to really get the best out of it. But Maresca has an exceptional job, and I think Chelsea to finish fourth is, I would say, it might be a decently comfortable top four finish. The gap between Chelsea and Newcastle might see itself coming towards the tail end of the season. I don't know, but this is the direction I'm sort of feeling. So yes, Chelsea in fourth for me. Right, so now we have the top three, and it's the same top three as last year. Now, obviously, last year, how did they finish? Of course, Man City did finish second, Man City in third, Arsenal in second, and Liverpool in first. Now, is this order going to change? Now, let's start off with third. I've decided to put Liverpool. Now, multiple things have happened with Liverpool, obviously, post-season. The loss of Diogo is huge for them, not just from a emotional point of level, but also because of how good he is and the services that he can bring to the table. It's just an unfortunate loss, for sure. So that's that. I don't really talk about it either. I think we just need to move on from that. They've lost Trent to Real Madrid, a decent right back in my opinion. You've got to agree to that. He may have slightly dipped off in recent years, but he's still that good enough for Real Madrid to snap him up. They've lost Kwanzaa now to Leverkusen. They've lost Luis Diaz, which is a huge player as well to find. And you still got a aging Virgil van Dijk, and you still got an aging Mo Salah. And to be honest, I think I mentioned this before at some point. I said that they are lucky enough to keep those two players in because they were out of contract last season. But again, because aging, everybody's going to age, right, as he goes on. So they need to really make a team without those two players. They need to find some way to really have that. And I think this season is probably that transition period where they're really going to start to see a dip in performance from those two players, and I think it's really going to impact them. But they've brought in really, really good players. I think, in my opinion, they probably had the second best transfer window behind Arsenal. They've had brought in Mamardashvili, which is the goalkeeper, from Frimpong, from Wirtz, that's huge, right? Kirkes and Akitske. These are really good players, really young players, and of course, I think to a certain extent, they are really going to replace some of the current Liverpool players as well. But Liverpool are known for their attacking talent as well. Defensively, I think without Van Dijk, it's a little bit lacking. Alisson, of course, I think is one of the other ones that are really, really good. But ultimately, I think with the players they brought in, the depth is going to be intense for them, and I can see that. And with the European commitments as well in the Champions League, I just don't really think they'll struggle that much. But there are still reasons for me to put them in third, because I just think the other two teams are probably going to handle it a lot better. And I think those two teams, especially City, in my opinion, are the best when it comes to handling such things. Despite City's slumps last season, they still managed to hold on pretty nicely, in my opinion, despite it being a mess considering they've won 4 in a row before that. But Liverpool, I think with the players they brought in, of course, they're huge. They're huge players. They're really, really good, of course, don't get me wrong. But I think this season is going to be a slight transition period from the highs of winning the league and first time asking from Arne Slot. Coming into the season, it's probably going to be slightly challenging. And I just think also because the other two teams, in my opinion, are better, especially Arsenal, when they've had such a stellar transfer window. But Liverpool do snap in Alexander Isak, which I think is weird now, considering you've got Ekitike and Wirtz to get in. Isak is like overloading the striking options. I don't know, but if they really do bring him in, I think that's what going to make Liverpool a lot scarier coming to next season, or this season rather. So right now, second and first, obviously, the top two that we're kind of used to seeing in recent years, of course. Where do I think they're going to finish respectively? In second, I put Arsenal. I'm going to get flamed. And I think a lot of teams don't see City finishing as champions. And at the back of my head, I also genuinely don't see City finishing as champions. But because I just support them so much, to the point I just love them, it's just me being delusional to see them finishing first. But honestly, if you ask me personally, I genuinely see Arsenal winning the league this season to a certain extent and to a high caliber as well. The players they brought in my opinion, are the best. Really exactly what they need, right? Kepa, good backup. Zubimendi, decent player. Nodegaard from Brentford, exactly what they need. Madueke from Chelsea, absolutely. And Gyökeres from Sporting, really, really good striker as well. There's really lost a lot of players, right? Jorginho, sure. Tierney, sure. Raheem, not really. To be honest, I don't really care. Neto, has gone back to Bournemouth. Tavares, the Lazio, and Tomiyasu has been released. But there is something about this Arsenal team where you're telling me that Arteta has been with this team and a lot of the players have stuck with him for so many years, right? They finished second fiddle for so many years. And you're going to tell me this is going to be another season where you're going to finish second again. They finished second 3 in a row. I just don't see how they're going to finish second again this year, despite me predicting them to finish second because I love Man City too much. To the point, right, if that's the case, if they're not going to win the league this year, I'd rather they finish third than finish second because, again, it's going to look so horrible on them to finish second for 4 years in a row. That is crazy. You're going to go quadruple first and now go quadruple for second. I wish there was a medal for that, but unfortunately not. But nonetheless, Arsenal have had a stellar window. I still feel that they've had a better window than Liverpool. Yes, Liverpool brought in big names for sure, but I think Arsenal probably brought in the players that really are just needed for them to push that one step further. They really got to do it this season. Really got to go all in for it. And of course, that means, in my opinion, City are going to finish first. Now, let's have a really quick talk about City's transfers. I'm going to give them the screen time that they deserve, right? KDB obviously has left, which is a shame for us. Walker has left to Burnley, which I think we've done, we've been through the phase of making do without him, so to the point we're comfortable. Perone has gone to Como, which again, we didn't see much of him, or rather didn't see any of him as well. Victor Rice, when we signed him, I was like, yeah, we've got a decent player, right? Let's make the most out of him. And then ended up he's now gone on to loan to Girona. So again, I don't really understand why. When clearly, again, defensively, we do need some help. And in that, we've got Trafford and we've got Bettinelli, 2 goalkeepers. I'm sure Bettinelli was just a backup. But with what we've seen with Edison in the Club World Cup, that has obviously inspired us to sign another goalkeeper. And I think Trafford in is probably the right idea. It just reminds me of a Joe Hart. A possible Joe Hart coming back in the name of James Trafford to really help this team. As I mentioned, his stats in the championship have been amazing. His reflexes, everything is really, really good. I hope he does the same with us over here. Of course, I think that will mean Ortega is probably going to be leaving the club relatively soon, albeit I don't know where. But for Edison as well, I just don't see him being our starting goalkeeper. Maybe starting second half of next season, this season, whatever you want to call it. Trafford has to be up there, in my opinion, for me. So that's that. Reinders as well, really good. Him and Rodri should be a very good partnership. Cherky, really good attacking talent. And of course, 8 Nori as well from Wolves. So, again, the bulk of the team at City has pretty much stayed the same, which I think is good. And we still need to work on that. Again, attacking, I think we're still fine. It's always the defensive woes. I've had a whole video about that as to why I think City are as bad as they've been last season, which is just, their weaknesses all being exposed. But yeah, so that'll be it really. City, I hope they win the league again. Yay. Arsenal second, Liverpool third. But there we go, guys. Thank you very much for watching. This is my Premier League predictions. Of course, I think a lot of teams are probably going to disagree with you. They're going to be like, why aren't the promoted sides in the relegation spots? First of all, it's crazy to put West Ham, Wolves and Brentford in that position. And of course, probably a lot of people argue City will not win the league again this year. It just doesn't seem right. And probably some of you might even argue that why am I putting Nottingham Forest decently low, probably. Some of you might even argue, like, why am I putting Tottenham in 9th? They probably could finish higher as well. There are going to be a lot of, debate about this, and of course let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. But at the back of my head, this is exactly what I feel it's going to be like. I know it's going to be very wrong come to the tail end of the season, which I think will be a lot of lols. I will be reacting to this video, of course, and be like, oh, this is exactly what I said a year ago, or like when I started of the season, and I'm going to laugh at myself about whatever I've said. So yeah. Thank you very much for watching this one. I know it's crazy long. It feels very detailed, and I think I've spent a lot of time talking about the bottom half. But there is a reason, because I think the bottom half is always when it gets very, very hectic for a lot of the teams, and there has to be a very good rationale for me to put them there. at the top, it's more of like who I think is just going to be better coming into the season and how they're going to taper with all the commitments, European and stuff like that. But the bottom half is when it's, I think, arguably more scary for me, and I think it's very hard to provide you the very good rationale, which I spend a lot more time, going through that. And I think in the midfield as well, especially when you've got Crystal Palace and Everton, are just going to finish everywhere, anywhere. It's going to be very, very difficult to judge where they're going to finish. But yeah, that'll be it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Get discussing in the comments down below what you guys think about my predictions, and of course, where you guys think other teams are going to finish as well. But thank you very much for watching, of course, and I'll see you guys next time. Until then, goodbye.